All right, let's talk more about Heritage Day now. We know that President Cyril Ramaphosa will be virtually addressing this year's celebrations, of course, because of the COVID conditions that we're under. But let's be joined now by Professor Pitika Ntuli, who's a cultural analyst and artist. A very good evening to you, Prof. Always great to speak to you. In what context do you think we should be celebrating Heritage Day in South Africa in 2020?
I think we really need to take our culture extremely, seriously. It does look, to me that we are only paying, kind of lip, service, to who we are. We are not using our languages, and on the contrary, instead of celebrating, we are lamenting the issues of femicide, the issues of rape, the issues of child abuse, the issues of xenophobia. It's very difficult to celebrate when we still have got some of these terrible things happening in our society.
A very valid point there, Professor, and I think I'd like to also just shed a bit of light on that in our conversation this evening. I mean, what better do you think we can do in order to improve the way that we celebrate ourselves, our heritage, who we are, our languages, for example?
I think what we actually do, we need a very total, revolution. Because we cannot just, do patchwork here, patchwork here. Our entire education system does not speak to our needs. Our health system, doesn't, regard even indigenous, healing, that, seriously. So everything that we move and touch, it is done somehow in a Western way, and there is no essential Africanness that we see, being practiced. We take an example like when we install a president. On that inauguration, we are going to have all religious groups going there, to preach, but not the indigenous religions and the indigenous people of this land. So in other words, we just really realize that although we have got a paper independence, a political independence, but the social, political, cultural, and all the other aspects of it, we are still held, captive by foreign ideologies, foreign ideas, foreign practices, and foreign cultures.
Prof, I know we're going to run out of time, but I'd like to chat to you a bit about, the focus of Heritage Day within the context of where we find ourselves currently. You already spoke about that in your first answer, where you spoke about, how difficult it is to celebrate our heritage and our culture, in particular because we find ourselves facing certain social ills. I mean, if you look at just a little over a week ago, you had the South African Council of Churches, for example, standing in a silent prayer declaring that corruption is not our heritage. Is there a need to celebrate this day when South Africans are faced with exactly what you refer to, so many social ills like corruption and inequality, where you sometimes feel that that is being drowned by a lot of these social ills that we're facing as a country?
I think it is important, for us to celebrate it, because even now as we celebrate it, then it gives us an opportunity to point out what we should not be doing, and then probably suggest what we should be doing. I would be suggesting that this month and even tomorrow, we should actually be sitting around celebrating a new way in which we are planning to recover our identity, to build our nation, to come with social cohesion, to heal the divisions that apartheid has. So in other words, we should be talking about the reconstruction of our society, the redress of the things that are wrong, the remembering of the dismembered people in the country, and also to focus on what Africa and our country needs, and how we can do it, and who can actually do it, what structures are very necessary for us to establish if we are indeed going to reverse this tide of westernization and become truly, or begin to become Africans again.
How do we become Africans again? And I think it's quite pertinent that I also ask you, Professor, if we talk about heritage and identity somehow as Africans of this continent, our cultures, I beg your pardon, and heritage are also intertwined. I mean, what do you make, for example, of protests taking place in South Africa today against fellow brothers and sisters? If you talk about an Africanness, which is somehow intertwined, I mean, if we talk about it in the context of today, just today we saw protests against, brothers and sisters from other parts of the continent.
Yeah, that's exactly what the biggest problem it is, because our education, system does not even have any curriculum that is going to speak even about the issues of exile. Most of our people have been in exile, and they lived with people who were protected by people in Malawi, protected by people in Nigeria, and some of our people have got even children, there. And when those children come in here and their relatives who have contributed towards our own struggle, we say these are amakwerekwere. To put it well, our leadership, political leadership, has betrayed the template that the earlier leaders who liberated the continent, the Kwame Nkrumahs, the Sekou Toures, the Nyereres, who wanted one Africa from Cape to Cairo, Morocco to Malagasy, with one or two languages, with our own currency, with a military high command to protect our countries, to develop a civilizational stage rather than a stage-to-stage relationships. So there has been, in a sense, a betrayal, by the leadership of in our countries by not following an African agenda, reading from what Nkrumah had said, what Nyerere had said, their books that are going to guide us, to achieve the sense of who we are.
And just finally, Professor, how do we then recover from that if there isn't even a political will, as you say?
Yeah, and maybe the problem is that we are almost just looking up at government, and we are not looking up at universities. We are not looking up at the NGOs. We are not looking up at our communities. In other words, finally, unless there is a very massive, mobilization, of, the people to say, here we are, here, our land is being sold. We don't even have our own land. We don't have our education. We don't have anything. There needs to be a very serious rethinking amongst our thinkers, our academics, our revolutionaries, our artists, our singers. We need to compose songs about the terrible state in which we are. We need to do paintings that are going to, we need to do murals that are going to point out the way in which we should be celebrating ourselves and rediscovering our sense of being.
Thank you very much indeed. Always a pleasure speaking to you, Professor Pitika Ntuli, a cultural analyst and artist. Always great speaking to you about how we preserve our cultures and our heritage, especially during this time.